Good evening. I'm Rachel Floor, Executive Director of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. And on behalf of all of my library and foundation colleagues, I'm delighted to welcome all of you who are watching this evening's program online and everyone here in person with us tonight. I would first like to acknowledge the generous support of our underwriters of the Kennedy Library Forums, lead sponsors Bank of America and the Lowell Institute, as well as the Mass Cultural Council and our media sponsor, the Boston Globe. I'm also delighted to welcome Steve Kadish, Governor Baker's former chief of staff and co-author of their book, Results: Getting Beyond Politics to Get Important Work Done. Both Steve and Governor Baker have kindly agreed to sign copies of his book after tonight's program, and our bookstore has copies available for sale if you are interested. We look forward to a robust question and answer period this evening. You'll see full instructions on screen for submitting your questions via email or comments on our YouTube page during the program. When Q&A starts, we'll invite those of you who are joining us in person to proceed to the microphones on the aisles to ask your questions. And while you're thinking about your questions, I just ask you to please take a moment to silence your cell phones. Now that we have the business taken care of, I want to say how thrilled we are to have this opportunity to talk about leadership with our distinguished guests, and it's a pleasure to welcome our featured speaker tonight. For more than 3 decades, Charlie Baker has been Massachusetts' go-to person for effective leadership. He has led big organizations through complex challenges and major transformations spanning nearly every facet of public life. Early in his career, he led 2 state agencies and oversaw key reforms of the state budget and K-12 education. As CEO of one of our state's biggest health insurers, he led the organization from the brink of bankruptcy back to solid financial health and achieved a #1 national ranking among healthcare plans. During his 8 years as governor, he prioritized performance over partisanship, steadily guiding us through turbulent political waters and an unprecedented global pandemic. He left office with sky-high approval ratings and an even stronger reputation for effective leadership. After so many years of distinguished service and achievement, it was inevitable that the word would get out about our go-to leader. So when the NCAA gave him a call, Charlie Baker stepped up to lead again. A former college athlete and parents of 2 others, our guest tonight is now leading the transformation of a major national organization representing more than 500,000 college athletes who compete for more than 1,100 member schools in all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico.
We have one in Canada, too.
There we go. Fun fact. In his 1960 address accepting the Democratic nomination for president, John F. Kennedy observed that courage, not complacency, is our need today, leadership, not salesmanship, and the only valid test of leadership is the ability to lead and to lead vigorously. Charlie Baker has met that test time and again. It's my very special pleasure to welcome Governor Baker to tonight's program, not only because of all the reasons I just mentioned, but also as a fellow former Needham High School Rocket. Thank you for being here, Governor Baker. It's also a pleasure to welcome Barbara Kellerman, our moderator for this evening, to the library. She was the founding executive director of the Center for Public Leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School, the Kennedy School's James McGregor Burns Lecturer in Leadership, and a member of the Harvard faculty for over 20 years, and is currently a fellow at the center. She is the author and editor of many books, has appeared on national and international media outlets, and has contributed articles and reviews to the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, the Los Angeles Times, and the Harvard Business Review. Her next book, Leadership from Bad to Worse: What Happens When Bad Festers, will be published by Oxford University Press next year. Please join me in welcoming our special guests.
It is an honor, and in an hour I'll let you know if it's also a pleasure to talk to Governor Baker, but you'll be joining me in that. So thank you very much for having me. I'm going to make just a very few comments about leadership in general. Then we're going to be talking for about 40 minutes or so, maybe 35, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for questions. So I have no doubt that Governor Baker would support the idea that leadership is hard, leadership in the United States of America. By the way, leadership in liberal democracies generally. So let me just make a few comments on why it's so hard. It's hard because of American history, which is anti-authority in its origins, meaning the way we were founded was through the revolution. And if you look at the literature from the founding days, it's all anti-authority. The ideology, democracy, independence, it's about the rights of the individual. It's not about the rights of any authority figure. Leading now, however, is even harder than it was before because of changes in the culture. Just autobiographically, when I walked into a classroom when I first started teaching, they would call me Professor Kellerman or Dr. Kellerman, that is the students. Now when I walk into a classroom, I'm lucky if they don't call me Babs. In other words, by calling me Barbara, which most students do now, they are collapsing the distance between me, I used to be up there, they used to be down here, and now we're like this. So the culture has changed, and obviously technology has changed. So some of you may have read one of the consequences of this is that leaders are leaving their leadership positions in droves. Leading is harder than it used to be, much harder. It was always hard, but it's harder now. So when we listen to Governor Baker over the next 45, 60 minutes talk about leadership, I think we should be aware of how difficult it is to get anybody these days to do what we want them to do. And the gratifications of being a leader are also fewer than they used to be. So it's against this backdrop of how hard a job it is now to lead, whether it's a state or the NCAA. And I'm going to therefore turn to the governor with this in mind, appreciating and recognizing the difficulties of leading, but not before. I think I held it up before. I will hold it up again. One of the reasons this book, co-authored with Steve Kadish, has gained so much traction is for the reason that I just said, because results, it's titled Results, and the subtitle is Getting Beyond Politics to Get the Important Work Done, is because of how hard it is and how many leaders and managers out there are looking to have some guidance, and this book provides it. So, Governor Baker, are you ready? Have you braced yourself?
Yes, I'm fully braced.
You're fully braced. Okay, good. So I'm going to start by asking if the work that you did on this book, which was ruminative and reflective as opposed to itself practical, but it drew on your years of experience as a leader, not just when you were governor, but as we heard earlier, before that. How applicable is most of this, but also what you've learned generally to the job that you have now, president of the NCAA? And I realize you're still relatively new in the job, but not so new that you can't comment on comparisons.
No, I think a lot of the lessons that Steve and I tried to tease out in that book, you can apply to a lot of different leadership settings. I would argue you could use them in almost any kind of organizational or management engagement. And I'll just start with the first one, which for me was always the most important one, which is that people are policy. There's a million different ways to frame that. People talk about getting the right people on the bus, people in the right seats. Any really good organization, more often than not, one of the things people will say about it is that it works because it has good people, and the people are in the right roles, and they actually seem to get along and like each other and are committed to some mutually defined set of objectives. And I think you can, big or small, public or private, for-profit, non-profit, you can apply that particular piece of advice almost anywhere.
So you can follow getting good people. But let me go to the second step, which is...
It's not just good people, it's the right people in the right job.
Did I say good? I apologize.
No,
it was right people, totally.
I've always, when you get to be the ripe old age of 67 and you've seen, there is pattern recognition. Eventually I'll forget it all. I haven't yet. But one of the things you realize is that more often than not, somebody who isn't succeeding in a role, it's not because they're not smart, and it's not because they're not trying. I mean, once in a while it will be that. But more often than not, they're just in the wrong role. And putting somebody into the right role and then helping them be successful in that right role is, I think, in some respects, one of the most important elements of management and leadership that a lot of people miss. That, so-and-so's not doing a good job. They must not be trying very hard. They must not be very smart. Actually, they're both of those things. The role you have them in is just not the role in which they are most likely to be successful.
So what you're saying is a lot of it is about fit.
Yes.
The fit.
You bet.
Between the person
Yep.
and the position, I think is what you're saying. So when you thought about taking this new job, you must have really paid attention to the question of fit between yourself and the post that because clearly
Yep.
this is very important to you.
Yep. This was not on my radar. Honestly, there really wasn't a lot of things about work that were on my radar. I thought I was going to spend most of the year talking about this with Steve. And in October of 22, Sam Kennedy from the Boston Red Sox called me up and said, I just talked to the firm that's doing the search for the next president of the NCAA, and I read the job description, and you were the first person I thought of. And I laughed, and I said, Sam, I'm not from higher education. I've never spent any time in college sports. I don't know why you would think that. And he said, well, I'm going to send you the job description. I just want you to read it. So he sent it to me, and I read it, and then I showed it to my wife, Lauren, who read it. And she finished it, and she held it up, and she said, oh, this thing does sound just like you. They wanted a former college athlete. I'm a former college athlete. My wife was a gymnast at Northwestern. My brother was a baseball player at Princeton. 2 of our kids played football in college. We have tons of friends and colleagues who are former student athletes. And the whole thing was about how the NCAA is 1,100 organizations, 500,000 student athletes. It has 180 committees. Yes, 180. And it's the most distributed decision-making model you've ever seen. And that, for somebody like me who'd spent most of my career in healthcare and government, wasn't something I was going to run away from screaming. It was something I actually thought would be kind of interesting. And I care a lot about the mission. We have lots of work to do, and there's all sorts of things that need to get dealt with. But boy, I personally don't believe there's a more powerful human potential development machine out there than college sports. It teaches all the lessons in this day and age, especially, that you want young people to learn.
So there's no way you can say that. I'm going to ignore this for a moment because you're sounding so clear about that without me asking what are those key lessons.
Happy
I'm
to
not
share
saying you
them.
need to enumerate all of them, but several. I think people would be interested in hearing what you consider the key lessons that we're now talking about college-age kids that they should be learning, and they can learn, at least to a degree, through college sports.
The biggest lesson, I think, is to be able to be a teammate. We live in a world where the culture is more and more about me or I. And great organizations succeed more often than not because they're about we. And the best part about being an athlete and on a team is you are put in a position where you have to figure out how to be successful among many and how your role and your responsibility makes the whole better. You have to be able to put your particular interests aside to make the rest of the organization successful. I think that's a life lesson that I think is incredibly important. The second thing is, you lose. I mean, it's mathematically, unless you're a Georgia football team, it's mathematically impossible not to spend time losing and learning how to do that gracefully and learning how to win gracefully and understanding you will get knocked down, you will fail, you will have to get back up and try again and master your whatever it is you're working on. And I think those lessons I think you can apply them to just about anything.
So is this possible to inculcate sufficiently in a moment in time in which you yourself just said a lot of it is about me, me, me? So I'm a student of followership as much as I am of leadership. And when I say that leadership has always been hard, but it's harder than ever,
Yeah.
it's precisely because of what you're implying, which is about me, and I don't really want to follow you. Even if it's for the greater good and for the team, I don't want to follow. So I consider what's happening, for example, in Congress more a crisis of followership than of leadership. So how do you get people to the point where you shift from the me, me, me to the team mentality and try to, you're talking about college kids. You've got them essentially for 4 years, tops. How do you make it, I think you use this term, how do you make that a life lesson?
Well, I think I'd say a couple things about that. One is I've met with all 97 conferences in college sports, and I can't even count how many campuses I've visited. I've talked to over 1,000 student athletes. At this point, it's way over 1,000, and I talked to all of them about this sort of thing, and I can just tell you that the vast majority of them find both purpose and comfort and support from being part of a team. They are young. We certainly live in an era and an age where followership is a challenge, but the pressures on young people, especially given the challenges that come with having every bad thing that happens in the world in your hand and on your phone at every minute. I think one of the things most of them talk about is they're grateful that they have this built-in base of support that's really a big part of their support network in their system. And I think I really haven't met a lot of student athletes who are me people. They're for the most part, they're very focused on improving their performance. They're good at this, and when you're good at something, getting better at it isn't necessarily work, the same way trying to get good at something you're not good at is. But the vast majority of them really like being part of a team.
So I'm going to ask you a question that goes back to something I said about myself when I said that I walk into a classroom now and it's rather a different atmosphere than it was when I started teaching. So you've been a leader in different sectors, different venues for several years, decades too. So have you noticed that being a leader now, you're obviously now in a very different job than you were. That's clear. So the context, just that part has changed. But I'm wondering if you can comment on time. If you feel it's different now from what it was 20, 30 years ago, setting aside the differences in context, and if it is different, how is it different? And do you have any sense of where this is going? In other words, you're watching your successor, you're in this new job. How do you feel about this country at this moment in time compared to where it was when you're trying to, in the interest of the public good? That's what you're all about, is public service. If you can talk a little bit about the changes over time and where you see this going, that would be really interesting, I think, for people to listen to.
Well, I think part of any of you familiar with Storyworth? Nobody? My daughter gave my wife and me Storyworth for Christmas, which is each week you get given a question that your daughter asks you and you answer it. You write it down, it all becomes, and at the end of the year it's a book, right? This is going to be my second book, Steve, you're not in it. And one of the questions I got asked was, tell me about your neighborhood growing up, right? And so I wrote this long thing about the neighborhood I grew up in. And I realized when I got to the end of it that my world growing up was this big. That's how big it was. And I knew the names of every family and every kid on my street, and I knew the names of everybody in my elementary school, and my middle school, and my high school. And I never went to a professional sporting event. I went to one Red Sox game, I think, until I was either in or out of college. I went to a bunch of college sporting events. The TV was 3 channels, and then 56 and 38. And the thing I realized writing this thing is the world that I grew up in, whatever was going on in the grand scheme of things, my world was this big. And I think the biggest challenge that leaders have today is the amount of information that people have access to and the issues associated with trying to curate it, either to satisfy your own worldview so that you'll never see a single scrap of information that implies anything other than what you already believe, or just trying to figure out some way to actually figure out what's true, especially in an age where people make stuff up all the time and do a brilliant job of selling it through all kinds of platforms. I think it's way harder to figure out what anything that might be truth is. And, you know, David Bowie, when he was talking about the internet in the 1990s, he said it's going to be basically awesome and terrifying. And he said the terrifying part was, he said it's going to be, you're going to have so many people creating content and sharing content and distributing content, we're going to lose whatever truth is. And I think that makes both leadership enormously complicated, and it makes followership less likely and more difficult. Because I could say we had a great year last year, whatever it was we did, but there's a whole countervailing force coming from somewhere else that says we didn't. And it comes like a sledgehammer, just over and over and over again. And I think it's really challenging to lead these days.
So, Governor, I again want to pick up on something you said and connect it to the book. So, I don't know if you call them steps, but the second thing is follow the facts.
Yep.
That sounds great, but how the hell, am I allowed to say hell at the Kennedy Library?
You did.
How the hell, it's true, good point. How the hell do you do it when, as you just said, people make stuff up? And there is no agreement. You know, in the old days, we could agree that right was right and left was left. Maybe that's not the best term to use in a political context, but you get the point. But now, as you just said, you implied there was no agreement on the facts, and your phrase, people make stuff up. So in an environment where people make stuff up, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of the big changes in your leadership life has been leaving the state of Massachusetts, and now the entire country is everybody's your constituent. If you make stuff up, if people make stuff up, how do you follow the facts?
So I kind of walked right into that one, didn't I?
Yes, it was lovely, and
Thank you.
I opened the door. And
Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that, yeah.
I'd say a couple things. One is, I can't remember where we say it in the book, but we both talk a lot about listening more than we talk. And I think one of the things that is different about leadership now versus at some point in the past is really good leaders now have to be exceptional listeners. And they need to listen to everybody. And when I talked about going and talking to the 97 conferences, pretty early on in my time at the NCAA, it wasn't to tell them what my plan and my vision was. It was to listen and to hear them tell me what they think truth is and how they feel about how things are going and what they think our challenges are. And part of the reason why we spend so much time getting to know our colleagues in local government during our time in office, and part of the reason why when I was at Harvard Pilgrim, I used to do some really unusual things to get out and listen and talk to people and just hear from people on the ground who are actually doing a lot of this stuff in healthcare, because somehow in a world where there's a swirl around what truth is, right? You have to figure out what you think it is. You have to share that with the folks that are on your team. You got to give your team an opportunity to tell you where you're right and wrong. And then you have to get to some point where you have a general agreement about what you think and they think the facts are, and then what to do about it. And if there's a whole bunch of other people who have a completely different set of facts than yours, you got to be willing to hear them, but you also have, if you don't think their set of facts make sense, you got to be willing to reject them too. And just keep going in the direction you think you're supposed to go in. Because in the end, it's a process, right? My dad always used to say that success is never final. There's no such thing as you finished. And the way you have to think about this is it better next week, next month, next year than it was before? And if you keep making it, whatever it is, better by some set of metrics, you'll never be finished, but you can create progress. And for public sector institutions in particular, progress is a big part of how you sustain belief.
So, Governor, I have a few other questions, and then we're going to turn to the audience. But I thought I would stop for a minute and effectively give you an open mic. Is there something you want to say to this group? There's also an online constituency that whether it's about leadership, the state of Massachusetts, your new job, the state of the world, the state of the country. Would you like to take a few moments, just not me prompting you saying, I've got a message, I want to say something, so I'm giving you the opportunity.
Okay, so I wrote the epilogue in the book, okay? And the epilogue was about public service. And the fact that you're here and the fact that folks are listening or watching online says to me that this is an audience that cares about public service. I am never going to stop believing in the positive good the public service done well can deliver. I mean, I got 67 years of firsthand experience, tons of books I've read, tons of people I've worked with who've told me stories, tons of people who've come up to me on the street and told me stories about how the work that we did or that somebody on our team did changed their life forever. And part of what makes, going back to your opening comment about the authority question and the revolution and sort of the built-in to the DNA rejection of authority, look, I would much rather live in a democracy than live in any other form of government. And I accept that there's always going to be a certain tension around the relationship between the governed and the governing entity, whoever it is. But I will always believe, and I'm assuming that most of you wouldn't be here if you didn't, that there are always opportunities in the public sphere, in the public square, to make things better. And that there is, and always will be, a community out there, and it's not a little one, that doesn't just want to fight about things, which is where a lot of people in the public square live these days, but actually want to make something better. And that is truly what sustains me when I'm flipping through the stuff that's just awful everywhere. Because I've seen it firsthand. I've talked to people about it. They've talked to me about it. I've read about it. And I'll never stop believing in it. And I would urge that for all of you. Because for all the warts and all the challenges, and they are immense, that come with governing and living in the 21st century, there are still moments and opportunities to make something much better than it once was. And if you turn a blind eye to that because there's so much out there that's running in the other direction, now we're living in Edwin Burke land, where all the good ones just stop caring, and that would be a shame.
Thank you. So I don't have much time left myself to have a voice, so I'm going to ask one final question before I turn it over to all of you. My life is the study of leadership and followership, and I can't think of a better person to ask about good, about virtue, and it's not, I don't just mean public service, which I heard you, of course, but I have, wrestled with good and bad as it applies to leadership. I'm as interested in bad leadership as, including evil leadership.
Sounds like you're writing a book about it.
As I many books about bad, including bad followers. And I have two axes for good. So one axis is effective, ineffective. So a good leader is effective. And the other axis is ethical, unethical. So a good leader is effective, and a good leader is ethical. So I'm wondering if I'm sure you're so dedicated, as you've just so eloquently said, to public service. When you try to be a good leader, what does good mean to you? What are the virtues of it? And part B of the question is, are you noticing that you have to, in this new position now, and you've had several leadership roles in your life, does each position, in order to be good, require a different skill set? Or are you taking the same skill set and applying it in different contexts? So good across the board. I'm interested in good, hearing you on good.
Well, I think, to get back to your point about the changing nature of the contextual environment, I really do believe that to be a good leader these days, you have to be a much better listener than you used to have to be.
Yeah.
And you have to listen to far more people from far more points of view with far more intensity. But I think the most important thing a good leader has to bring to the table is a sense of authenticity about the work and the mission that will encourage people to follow. I worked on Bill Weld's campaign when he ran for governor in 1990, and he won. And when he called me up to talk to me about coming to work in his administration, at that point he'd had a whole bunch of people say no, right? Which he told me, which I thought was an interesting thing to tell me, because the message I was getting was, nope, maybe this guy Baker will play, And so he asked me if I'd be willing to come work in the administration. I said yes, right away. I said yes. And I didn't even talk to my wife before I said that. And yeah, I know, bad move. And I went home and I said, Governor-elect Weld asked me if I'd come work for him. And I told him yes. And I hope that's okay. And she said, well, do you believe in him? And I said, yeah. That's why I worked on his campaign. And she said, okay. You still have to figure out, in this world we live in now, how to get people to believe in you, to believe in what it is you want to do, why it is you want to do it, and how you think it can get done. And then you got to be willing to accept the ideas and the thoughts and the approaches that are going to come at you from all these people who have chosen to join your team. And we didn't have a lot of turnover over the last 8 years. And I'm not taking credit for this because it's much bigger than that, but there are a bunch of people who just said they really liked the people they worked with, and they liked the work they were doing. And that was during a global pandemic, among other things. And I think for most of us, when I was following as well as leading, the thing I cared about the most was, was sort of the gyroscope that you're talking about, which was when that thing spins, are we trying to do good things the right way for the right reasons, yes or no? And I think in this day and age, more than ever, that really matters. And you just have to, it's harder, but if you stick to it, the people that work with you will stick to it too. I mean, I used to text people, I still do, at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I get an answer 5 minutes later. They could have waited till the next day, but they don't. And they don't because they believe in what it is we're trying to do. And they know that the answer they give me, I will hear and try and do something with it.
Testimony to good.
Right.
Nice note to end. Yep, the lights are coming on. As mentioned earlier, they're coming at you right now. When you have a question, which has to be soon because we don't have all that much time, please come to the mic, and if you feel like saying your name, by all means say it. Otherwise, get directly to your question and make it kind of a little brief so that we can use the maximum amount of time to hear from the governor. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. My name is Christian Cunny. Governor Baker, I served at MEMA under your tenure. And my question today is
You were busy.
Yes. My question today is, especially during your first few weeks with the massive snowstorms of 2015, through the Merrimack Valley gas explosions in 2018, to COVID-19, it seems like the frequency of problems, and not just disasters, but problems facing government, are increasing. And it's homelessness and migrant issues, and it's continuing to snowball. And I think for a young folk like myself, it's becoming, the issues in Washington, D.C., and even here in Massachusetts, are discouraging folks from getting involved in public service. So how do we get more young folks involved, engaged in conversations, and also really show them the positives of public service that you and I both saw during our time?
I think that's a really good question, and it's a hard one to answer because, so much of the traffic will be in here, which, like I said, some is legit and a lot of not so much. I think the thing you have to do is read the book. Kidding.
No, he's not kidding. He's so not kidding.
But be willing to play your part. The decision I made to go to the NCAA was because I saw an opportunity. It's a service job. At the end of the day, you have 500,000 student athletes and 1,100 schools that are interested in you helping them be successful. I think the only thing you can really do is play in one way or another, participate, lead, find a role, find an opportunity. I would argue that one of the great challenges for most folks in public life these days is being able to recognize and understand that while it looks kind of raw out there, and it is, it's looked raw for a long time. I've kind of lived a lot of history now because I'm of a certain age. I can state with a fair amount of confidence that over the course of my life, there have been lots and lots of terrible things that have gone on around the world and lots of good things that have gone on. And the difference is you have way more access to it. You collectively, society, have way more access to it than you once had. And if you're curating it in a certain way on your phone, the algorithms are just going to drive more and more of it in your direction. And I think that makes it really hard for people to find balance. And the only way I know of to create balance and to deal with the question you're asking for is to play.
Thank you.
Are you still playing?
Just switch to higher ed.
But you're still playing?
Yes.
All right.
Hello, my name is Linda Sheehan, and before I ask my question of the governor, I have a quick comment for our moderator. In May of this year, at the age of 64, I graduated from UMass Lowell with my degree in history and political science. I can't, thank you. First degree. I can't ever imagine calling you Babs, so thank you, Professor. Governor Baker, at the risk of making your wife curse yet again, as much, I heard you, as much as you love your new job, would you consider a run for president? No. Not the answer I was hoping for.
Yeah, if I was going to run for something, I would have run again for a third term.
Okay.
I spent 8 years working for 2 governors because I really believe in Massachusetts. And, the thing you have to run for office, in my opinion, is a thing in your gut that just won't go away. And for me, the thing in my gut that wouldn't go away was wanting to be part of public service in Massachusetts. And that's why I served on the Board of Selectmen in Swampscott and participated in the rewrite of the town's charter. I mean, there's just, and at least not now, I don't have that, whatever it is, in my gut.
Well, I think myself in the room are going to hold on to at least not now.
You're a good listener. Good for you.
Thank
I
you so
heard it
much.
too. Good for you.
Thank you.
Congratulations again. That's quite an accomplishment.
William Mulholland. I've been building government spending software products for the past decade. First, just want to express a moment of gratitude to you, Governor, for your positive impact for the state of Massachusetts, and now the positive impact you're making on the NCAA. My question is kind of on your topic of making, how can we make things better as a community? And how can the NCAA ensure a commitment to safeguarding student athletes and their families through the establishment of maintenance of universal standards of NIL rights, fostering a landscape where these athletes both thrive on the field and off the field?
It's a really good question. We currently have a series of initiatives that hopefully are going to land at some point in the next few months on the NIL piece to create what I call consumer protections for student athletes and families. And I won't get into all the details, but agents should have to sign some sort of document like they do in every other financial space, or brokers that says they work for the client. There's nothing the agents have to do right now with respect to that. There should be a uniform contract, and if somebody wants to write contract outside that, they should have to talk to the student athlete and their family about why. There are student athletes who sign contracts where they're under contract to somebody for 10 years, right? That's a shame. And in fact, there are lawsuits currently going on around that. The uniform contract should be 4, right? Because that's as many years as you spend in college. There should be some kind of registry that de-identifies a lot of the data around NIL so that people have some idea what the market looks like. People don't know. And I think we can get a bunch of things done in that space. Look, I think NIL is a great thing, but there's so little accountability, so little transparency that I think it makes it really hard, unless you are a really sophisticated player in the space with really good advisors. There are real opportunities for people to take advantage of people, and we need to fix that. The second part, there's a whole series of things that are going to take effect in August of next year, which I think are going to help on some of this. First thing is we're going to put in place a uniform nationwide injury insurance protection program that will cover student athletes for 2 years after they graduate if they get injured playing a sport while they're in college and they're still in treatment when they finish college, when they leave college, one or the other. Second is 10 years for kids in Division I, which is where the most attention on this issue has been applied. If you're in Division I, you got 10 years to complete your degree, and your scholarship will be available to you for 10 years. If you get a scholarship, you get to keep it, whether you play or you don't play, and you have to have access to education and resources around mental health services available to you while you're on campus. Those are going to be big, I think. And there's more coming. There's a lot more coming.
Governor Baker, you talked about working for former Governor Well because you truly believed in him, and I just did the same. I'm from the great town of Braintree, Massachusetts, and I just worked for our incoming mayor-elect, Erin Joyce, and her...
Did you have fun?
Absolutely, I loved it.
Did you meet a lot of people who are positive?
Yeah, it was great. It was a wonderful campaign.
It's not all negative.
And what we did was we listened to people and we upset the incumbent. But I would just like to ask, one of our main focuses during the campaign was talking about we want to end and reverse our town's $4.3 million budget deficit. You have experience both at state and local politics. Do you have any recommendations for us, particularly with attracting businesses to the town?
The biggest recommendation I could give you is to talk to that guy right there, Steve Kadish, okay? Talk to Steve Kadish. Seriously. He will be worth more than you will ever spend on a consultant. Just talk to Steve, okay?
Thank you, Governor.
Hello, Kirsten. I want to thank you for all the work that you've done as governor. You've been great. So when you said that success is not permanent, I'm curious to hear, what you did between the 2010 election, because, you lost to Governor Patrick.
Really?
Yes. But then, you won in 2014.
Yeah.
And you've, had the highest approval rating in the U.S. When you were governor. So I'm curious to hear, how you got back up and what you did differently between those two elections. Thank you.
So, we ran in 2010 and lost, and Governor Patrick ran a great campaign, and I called him up and told him that and wrote him a letter and said the same thing after it was over. But I did something that I think was kind of unusual. I went and talked to a lot of the reporters that covered the race, and I talked to a lot of the talking heads and a lot of the sort of chattering class, and said to all of them, so what did I do wrong? And people were perfectly happy to share what I did wrong. There's a big, long, horrifying list of things I did wrong. But the thing I'll never forget, and it changed the way I thought about a lot of things, was I have a friend who's a sales guy, and he said, you spent way too much time with your customers and not enough time with your prospects, which was his way of politely saying to me that I campaigned in places I thought I was going to do well, and I didn't campaign in places where I would be uncomfortable. And so when we ran in 2014, I campaigned so much in cities that at one point, one of the local media outlets wrote a story that was actually kind of snarky that said that Charlie Baker appears to be running for a seat on the city council. And what happened was two things. Number one, a whole bunch of people who'd never met or seen a Republican before saw one, and I didn't bite. And the second thing that happened was I got much better as a person and as a candidate. And one of the things I say about public service all the time is you will find no place on earth where you will get in front of more people you would not meet or get to know otherwise because of the breadth and spread of the work. And the more time I spent in those communities and the more time I spent getting to know folks in those communities, the smarter I became about the breadth of sort of humanity that lived in and worked in and played in Massachusetts, and the better it made me as a candidate, and it made me a way better governor. And And so when people said to me, you know, you could have just waited until after Patrick didn't run for a third term and then run for an open seat, and then you wouldn't have lost to him in 10. My answer to that would be the reason that we won by this much, and Karen Polito, by the way, would say we won because we did really well in Worcester County and we didn't do so well in the rest of Massachusetts. But the reason we won was because we lost in 2010 and we learned. We learned from our defeat and applied the lessons that we learned to the 14 race, and more importantly, to the time we spent governing after we took office.
Hello, Governor. My name is Nick Doshi. I just happened to complete my 5 years in Boston. Boston and Massachusetts has been my home as an immigrant, and I really enjoy being here. So just a question for you is like more of an advice. As an immigrant or as a person who is like quite fascinated in sports or be it like in some form of leadership, what sort of advice you can give so that like they could get more access to the resources here in Boston as well as Massachusetts?
Where do you live?
Right in the town of Boston, across 2 miles and 2 blocks away from Northeastern.
From Northeastern.
Yes.
Go Huskies. I tell you what, can you just write something down and give it to me before you leave? Because the reason I'm saying that is I don't know enough about that neighborhood in Boston, but there are some really terrific community-based organizations and service providers in almost every borough of Boston. I just don't know off the top of my head who the folks are that are in and around Northeastern. Steve, do you have thoughts on that one?
I think getting your name would be great.
But we can help with that.
Sure, yeah, I would be glad to.
Okay, do that.
That sounds great. Thank you. Yes.
I'm appreciative of what you said about success and failure, presenting equal opportunities for growth as your dad taught you. I'm also interested in knowing, do you perceive, this is for both of you, do you perceive the increasing push for familiarity and connectedness being ironically moving us to a point of a culture that's more me-centered or more self-centered? For example, Governor, if you were teaching a class of college students, how would you be comfortable with them saying, hey, Charlie, hey, Chuck, what's the assignment? Secondly,
Yeah, I would be. I
would
mean,
be. Okay.
I have people say to me all the time, hey, should I call you governor? And I say, no, Charlie's fine.
Okay. And secondly, do you believe that doing what you love is not only about fit, and I think you will say yes,
Yeah.
but also a reflection of who you are inside authentically and be willing to make sacrifices for what you want to do?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, look, I've had a couple of jobs in my career where I was a bad fit. Mm-hmm. And it was awful. I mean, there's nothing worse than trying really hard and being really bad over and over again. And I've been really lucky in the sense that most of my professional experiences have been pretty good fits. But I think purpose is really important for everyone. And in fact, I would argue purpose is like almost the most important thing. And whether the purpose is being a good dad or being a good brother or being a good son, you know, or whatever, or being a good whatever it is, purpose is the thing that fills your cup. And in a lot of cases, that's why it's important to do something that fills your cup because you enjoy it and you're good at it. It's hard to do something to fill your cup with a working experience where it ain't working, basically.
So, and in concert with what you said, do you believe that those jobs that weren't a good fit led you to the ones that were?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, I had plenty of,
Cool.
I made plenty of mistakes along the way, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, last question. I apologize to the rest of you, sorry.
Save the best for last. Good evening, Governor. My name is Chris Naf, and I'm a selectman in the town of Millbury. I'd first like to thank you for some significant funding you procured for us to help with some of our recent projects. And being from
Was
Worcester
that
County.
MVP money?
It was.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Great project, and we had you
Yeah.
at the ribbon cutting. That was
Right.
awesome. And I'd have to agree with Lieutenant Governor Polito. I think us in Worcester County, we're super.
Yeah.
We also have a mutual friend in John Budd.
Okay.
But I'd like to ask you, obviously, your list of accomplishments during office was lengthy, and it speaks for itself. I'm wondering if you feel that there was any unfinished business you felt you couldn't get to that you still think would be good for the Commonwealth to pursue.
Look, I tried really hard to get the Commonwealth to spend a lot of that federal ARPA money on housing.
Yeah.
I think housing's our biggest challenge. It's just the biggest population group that we lost between like 2019 and 2022, and I think it's still true through 2023, is that 25 to 35-year-old population. And the reason they're leaving is because they can't afford to buy a house or an apartment or rent a house or an apartment anywhere. And we, this is an issue that I was banging the drum on within 2 years of taking office because it's all I heard about everywhere I went. And we made modest progress on changing some of the rules to make it easier to get projects approved. At least you only need a majority now instead of 2/3 to actually get a vote in town council to move forward on a housing project. But it is still, the metro Atlanta area, metro Atlanta builds more homes in a year than we build in Massachusetts. Like almost twice as many. And they've been doing it for 5 years in a row. You can't. I remember when the median price of a house got to $400,000 inside 495, and I thought, well, that's it. That's high enough. It's going to get people's attention. We're going to move. It's now like 550. And I used to look out at audiences and just say, how many people in the room, if you didn't already own a home, could buy one? And I think it's our biggest existential challenge. I think it's a huge issue. I wanted to spend $2 billion on housing. Yeah. We have to solve that one way or the other.
Thank you.
So did you all hear him say that he didn't mind being called Charlie? Did you all hear that? Did you? You did, yeah? Okay. Charlie, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Barbara.